Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Pragati podcast. I'm the editor of Pragati, Amit Verma. If you head on over to our website, thinkpragati.com, you'll find a piece by the American economist Alex Tabarrok titled, "Let the World In." In his piece, Alex makes the argument that one industry in India with enormous scope for growth is the tourism industry. He explains why this is so and suggests reforms that the Indian government could carry out to make tourists flood into this country. He is not writing from a distance. As it happens, Alex is in Mumbai these days as a resident senior fellow with the IDFC Institute, and is here in the studio with me to talk about his piece. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Great to be here.
You've been a tourist in Mumbai for a while now, but you feel there aren't enough of you here. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, India has got to be one of the great tourist destinations in the entire world. There are, 35 UNESCO World Heritage Sites here, including the Taj Mahal, one of the 7 wonders of the New World. There is fantastic culture, food, religion. There's forts, there's elephants, there's history. I mean, it is just a absolutely fantastic place for tourists. And yet, there aren't actually that many. If you look at the raw numbers at first glance, it doesn't look bad. At first glance, what you see is that India receives about 9 million tourists every year. And they make a lot of money from those tourists, about $23 billion a year. Now, that sounds pretty good, except when you start comparing it with other countries. Like France, for example. France is the number 1 tourist destination in the world. And they receive almost 90 million visitors a year. So France has 10 times the tourists that does, India. Now, in part, France and other leading tourist destinations like Germany and Spain, they benefit from the fact that they're in Europe, and so they get tourism from one another. However, if you look at the United States, they've got, 77 million tourists every year. Or take a country like China, 56 million tourists. Or Turkey, 40 million tourists every year. Now, there's absolutely no reason, in my view, why India could not have as many tourists as Turkey or China. Turkey and China are great. Don't get me wrong. I'm all in favor of going to see the Great Wall in Istanbul. But people should also be coming to India. So India could double, triple, quadruple its number of tourists. And that would be tremendous for India. As I said, India is making about $23 billion every year from tourists. That could go up to $80 billion, $100 billion a year, which makes a huge difference. This would make tourism India's leading export sector.
So what's wrong? Why isn't that happening?
Well, one of the simplest reasons is even today, India has very convoluted and difficult rules for getting a visa. So if I, as a U.S. citizen, for example, want to go to Paris, I can pick up and go to Paris. I can go there for the weekend. I don't need a visa. I just jump in the plane and I'm in Paris or London or Istanbul. I don't need a visa in advance to go to Istanbul. The same thing is true for tourists in Germany. A German tourist can go to 177 different countries without a visa in advance, but they can't go to India. So if you're a German tourist and you're thinking, where shall I go on vacation? I can go to 177 different places without doing a whole bunch of paperwork, or I can go to India. India's great, but this requires a lot of advanced planning. I've got to apply for the visa. That takes weeks. The visa asks all kinds of questions about my parents, my grandparents. I don't even know where my grandparents were born. I got to look this up. Okay. And then I'm uncertain, will the visa be approved? I don't know. It takes weeks. I can't just decide to go on a trip to India. In fact, one study has estimated that the requirement to have a visa reduces tourism visitors by 70%. So in my view, India should tomorrow lift visa restrictions. There's no reason why you should need a visa to come to India. If 177 countries can let Germans in, India can let Germans in, or people from the United States or the UK. There's really no reason for a visa in advance. They should simply lift these restrictions immediately. They could do that cautiously, and this would increase tourism revenues tremendously, in my view.
So why are those visa restrictions there in the first place, and why are they perpetuated? Who benefits from those visa restrictions? Are they like the visa officials at the airport and, all the rent seekers who are controlling access? How does it work?
India, the term red tape comes from India. All of the paperwork was bound up with red tape.
Like the number 0.
Yes. So India, as well as other countries, has a sort of pride issue that they want to make sure that the people, coming to India obey the rules and are good people and so forth. The United States has this as well, I should say. Getting a visa to come to the United States is terrible. It's an awful process. So I'm against the U.S. visa system here as well. But I think the Indian visa system is particularly bad because it just costs India so much. It costs India billions in revenues, and that means that there are fewer jobs at a time when India needs jobs. India needs to keep its employment going. It needs 1 million new jobs every month. Lots of jobs are created in the tourism sector, not just in restaurants and hotels, but also in hotel construction. There could be a lot more building. In addition, India could use some of these revenues to protect and preserve its incredible artistic and historical heritage. And, I don't want to be a nasty, an unkind visitor, but I will say this. Some of the top sites are very well maintained and cared for, like the Taj Mahal. But there are fantastic places in India which are of interest to tourists which are not all that well maintained. Elephant Island, just off the coast here of Mumbai. It's a great place to go. It's a great place to visit. It's not well maintained. And I think India could use some of the revenues for more tourism to actually protect some of its historical legacy.
No, and that's so true. And what often happens is that because we live in India, we take all this stuff for granted. We see it every day. We don't really care about it. We don't really see it as an outsider would see it and recognize the charm and beauty of it. I remember a few years back in 2003 December when the tsunami struck and the coast of Tamil Nadu was devastated. And me and a couple of guys, we went on this tour where we were reporting. We traveled through the coast of Tamil Nadu and we were reporting on all the devastation. And it was incredibly harrowing. I was sort of live blogging it also. Very difficult sites. But one of the things that struck me there was that so much of that coastal area of Tamil Nadu was so incredibly beautiful. We went on an island off the coast somewhere there, which was just pristine beauty, and the tourism potential was incredible. And that's not typically a place you think of as having tourist potential. And it's purely because, we live here. We take everything for granted. But to get back to the subject of, what we are doing wrong. One, there are the visa restrictions. What else can we do to sort of have tourists coming in and enjoying themselves here?
So I think India also has a undeserved, perhaps, negative image for women. People, we often see in India stories of, rape or sexual assault and things like that. And it's actually a little bit peculiar to me because if you actually look at the statistics, India is a much safer society for women than the United States, if you look at the raw data. Now, it could be that, we're not entirely sure. The statistics in India, are always questionable.
I'd say there's a lot of underreporting. So for sure, the raw data wouldn't be so reliable. And there is this pervasive misogyny that, does exist here, I have to admit.
I think you're right. So there's definitely some of that. But I still think there's somewhat of an undeserved reputation. And maybe I think India could do some things to address this. Because overall, it is a safe society. I'm not worried about pickpockets here, for example. I haven't found that to be a
Right.
problem at all. The taxi drivers appear to honest to me. So that all, I think, works out well. One of the ways which other countries have done to improve their reputation in this regard is to have a special police force, a tourist police force, trained a little bit differently, bilingual or multilingual. And that, I think, having a tourist police force in key tourist areas in Delhi, in Agra, Rajasthan, in Goa, places like that, I think that would do a lot to reassure people that this is a great place to visit and also a safe place to visit. Other countries have done that. Thailand has done that. France and Italy have done that. And I think that this is one way where India could address this kind of negative view some people have.
You know, I read a statistic recently, I can't recall it offhand, but apparently at the time of the famous gang rape in Delhi a couple of years ago, someone brought out a report saying that out of, all of New Delhi's police force, a significant percentage, I forget how much it was almost half or more than half, was really deployed in VIP security and wasn't actually, looking after the rule of law. So the rule of law itself is a huge issue here. And I think it's not so much about having a special police force for tourists, it's just sensitizing the existing police and how to deal with tourism and so on. What else comes to your mind?
What else comes to my mind? Well, some of these revenues, if visa restrictions were lifted, for example, and you had more revenues, there's a lot that you could do there. Not only to simply maintain some of these structures, but to make them better. There's a lot of forts which could be, repaired and improved, and hotels could be built nearby so that people could better appreciate them. I mean, it is incredible just driving, around India, where you can come to a small village and it's got a magnificent fort, in the hills, and nobody goes there. So aside from the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, there's actually a lot of other places in India which could be of great interest to people, but they're hard to get to, the roads are not that great, there's maybe not, restaurants and hotels and guides there, ready. So one of the things that I think greater tourism revenue could do is it could have a virtuous circle where you have more revenues that's put into making things better for tourists and you get more tourists. And I think this could have really good spillovers for the rest of India. I mean, if you improve a road using tourist revenues, that's good for Indians as well. If you improve the police force for tourists because they generate a lot of money, well, that's going to be great for Indians as well.
How much of the answer to then resolving this lies in government actually proactively doing things to make things better, and how much of it lies in government just getting out of the way?
Mostly, I think it's getting out of the way. So that's one of the great things about lifting visa restrictions is that not only does it not take a lot of effort, it reduces the amount of effort that's necessary. Other things I found peculiar, for example, even today, it's very difficult for me as a foreigner to get a SIM card, right? Why should this be? This is crazy.
So tell me, what did you have to do to get a SIM card?
So you have to give, passport numbers, and you have to give all kinds of background information to do it legally, And it takes, several days, and I had to, consult an expert to help me to do this. And the crazy thing about it is that the reason I wanted to do this is so that I could buy things. For example, I wanted to use Zomato, which is the Indian food delivery, website. But you can't use it unless you have a local number. So I needed a local number to have food delivered. So why should anyone make it difficult for a tourist to have food delivered to their room? I don't know. Or to use Paytm, which is the sort of Indian PayPal version of PayPal. You need a local number. Or to use a Ola cab, you need a local number. It's very odd because to use Uber, my U.S. number works. But to use the Indian competitor to Uber, I need an Indian phone number. So that makes it more difficult for tourists to use the Indian version of Uber. And I don't know why this is. So Modi actually said that he would give away SIM cards to visitors at the airport. But that did not happen to me. I did not get a SIM card when I arrived.
Modi promised a lot of things to a lot of people.
That's right. But this is something that, again, the government could easily do simply by saying anyone can get a SIM card.
So you'd say a large part of the problem is government getting out of the way in the sense of relaxing the visa regime and, just removing these kind of restrictions on tourists, which only tourists recognize because we don't... And to some extent, you are also advocating some government action in things like improving the PR, for example, and improving, actually spending money in terms of public campaigns about, hey, we are a safe place and, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm suggesting is that there should be a good incentive there for the government to do these things because there's no other sector in the Indian economy with as much potential to grow as quickly as tourism. So, as I said, tourism in India could easily double, triple, quadruple. There's no other sector in the Indian economy where that could happen very quickly. And those revenues could be used for a lot of useful things, useful not just to tourists, but building roads, improving the infrastructure, improving policing. These would also be useful for Indian natives as well.
Alex, thanks a lot for being on the Pragati podcast. Pleasure talking to you.
It's great being here in India. More people should come.
To read Alex's piece, head on over to thinkpragati.com. His piece is titled, Let the World In. Also, do check out Alex's blog, Marginal Revolution, at marginalrevolution.com, which Alex writes with Tyler Cowen. I'm a Marginal Revolution fanboy. I think it's the greatest blog of all time. And between Pragati and Marginal Revolution, we've got it all covered. You don't need to read anything else.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Sorry to say, but there's been a slight delay due to the apocalypse having suddenly begun. As you can see, there's death, destruction, and chaos taking place all around us. But don't you worry, food and drinks will be served shortly, and I would recommend checking out IVM Podcasts to get some of your favorite Indian podcasts. We'll keep you going till this whole thing blows over. Thank you.